Greetings. We are going to do our Project 2 critique. We'll probably critique 2 or 3 of you at least on this video. We'll start with Janelle's work here, and we'll find her album. I can pretty much guess which one's going to be in there. Alright, looking at this, the first image that jumps out at me is this one. I really like the Volkswagen bus here. We also have a color version. And I think the color works all right. There's nothing contrasting. There's also nothing overtly like harmonious about the color relationships. I think I like the grayscale better. It seems to put a little more emphasis on the sharpness of the bus and then the blurriness. And I like how our focus is here. We have an interesting subject, and who doesn't like a little old Volkswagen bus? And then we have all this progressively blurry movement around it, and I think the composition works out really well. Like I said, the color's all right, but I think I do prefer the grayscale in the end. This image I react pretty positively towards. I think we have we have one other one like it, and I think this is by far the stronger image of the two. I'm a pretty good job panning here. I like how we see the car, and it's fairly sharp. Panning can be a challenge and to get done technically well, but your goal is to keep that subject as sharp as you can and let everything else go. And it can create interesting effects. And we have a nice contrast here of a somewhat sharp object and very blurry objects, but it also gives a sense of speed here. We have all these horizontal lines that are moving. And in the foreground, we have this line, house becomes a line, and we see this car, and it gives a sense of speed and motion and action. When we go to this one, there's just too many other things, in my opinion, that kind of detract from the image, and I don't like that things are a bit more diagonal. I like all this, the straight across horizontalness of this seems an added sense of speed. And then we have this car here, and then the angles are different. The car's more forward in the composition, which I don't know if that negatively impacts it, but I think the other one just works, is more dynamic, interesting. So I think they're about equally done technically well in terms of panning, but this composition is much superior. All right, nothing more mundane than vacuuming the rugs, and but I really like how you dealt with the shutter speed here. We have a couple of these. And I think, well, we got like 3 of them here, 4, and some grayscale. All right, lots of variety. All right, we got like 6 here to look at in consideration. And of these, I like this tighter crop. No, this one's good too, but I think my favorite one is actually the first one here, this one. I like, the action of the vacuum, the blur of the figure. I really like the texture of the curtains, and the little bit of the cabinet we get here, and the carpet. This one is interesting too, where you're almost more ghosty, very blurry, the vacuum static. I do kind of like this one. I actually wish the figure was a bit more in front of the window, and then maybe I don't know if I'd want to crop off this stuff on the left here if that were the case. But I don't like that interaction there. I like it over here, so maybe you can move the figure there. Here we have the figure fully in front, and I'm looking at this and I'm trying to decide. Again, I'm thinking perhaps in the process as I look at this of cropping off some of the right and left. I'm just curious if we can get if a tighter crop puts more emphasis in focal point. I think I do like it quite a bit better, cropping off right about here and here. There, and then we can focus more on that figure. I really like the dynamics of what's going on with the vacuum and the figure, and how I get little hints of the actual person. Then I see all this blurry, and it has a very awkward feel, and a very, I think, interestingly awkward feel. I find that very engaging. That's what I like about the long shutter speeds. It pushes us to see things beyond how our eyes see them. And that's how we so often think of photographs. It's just a replication of what we can see. But this ability to stop time can really transform it, depending and the tools that we have of aperture and shutter speed, we can really transform these images into something, well, very different than how our eyes actually function. And so there's something really interesting going on in this one. I'd probably crop it a little bit. Here you're getting closer to what I want, but I actually like the figure better. I like all the active elements vacuuming the figure in this one better than this one. So let's see. Yeah, this one just yeah, maybe there's just too much cluttery stuff going on in it. It's not very cluttery. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying as an image, there's just too many things to look at. So I like the ones where we can distill them down, or maybe we can crop them and distill them down. And that might be better too. So, all right, so here we go. Oh, good. It's like playing with GIMP or Photoshop a little bit, increasing it. So I'd actually kind of like to see this one in color. Maybe it's better in black and white. I don't know. Colors might clash. That's a difficult thing with color. And I like the drink wine sign. I like this. I really wish there was something more, objective or iconic in how you drew the light that could relate to, the signage of drink wine or something like that. Get playful with that. I think it'd be more effective. I mean, there's something interesting in this figure, the sign and the ghostiness, but I think it didn't quite all come together. This one is interesting merely because it feels like a candid. You got the tripod out here, and it looks like you're setting up to shoot something, but then this weird thing happens, and I kind of like the light off the wall. That's actually one of the more interesting things. I don't know in the end if I, call this a full success, but there are lots of interesting elements going on in the image, and that's one thing. In practice, we can find these interesting elements and try to bring them together into a great photograph. And you find interesting elements. I don't think they're all coming in together in a great photograph. What I like in this one is the interaction between the objective and this non-objective form here. I like that you're playing with the hands and holding this very non-objective thing. This got a little blown out. It might have been better if we could have reduced the intensity of that light, or something so there's a little texture to it and maybe a little color. Could have improved it a little bit, but I think your post-production processing certainly improved the image. It looks like you probably increased the saturation or something like that, and that helps this image quite a bit. So, good job with the exploring. Painting light there's so much you can do with it, but it also takes a lot of practice to really understand it and play with it and get there. But I think you found some interesting things there, and well done, Janelle. All right, so we are going to move on to our next person. We'll go down to John. All right, and find his album. Okay, so, oops, not shutter speed. Oh yeah, shutter speed. Okay, anyway. When I'm looking at these, one of the first images that I saw were these two here. And, yeah, I wish they were next to each other. I can't rearrange people's albums. But that's one thing to think about is when you're creating albums into Flickr, you can think of the arrangement in the order. For my purposes, maybe you have a reason of your own. For my purposes, it'd be better if these two are next to each other so I could talk about them. Anyways, I do like this foreground, and I like the legs just coming out of this darkness. And the grayscale one, I think the contrast has just been pushed a little too much. I kind of like it. Well, okay, there's a couple of things here. Like, I don't know if you just used a slider or what, but you were able to pull some more information out that I do not see here. And that was one of my first instincts when I looked at the color version is, I like this, I like the legs, but there's nothing back here. But it looks like you're able to pull some information out when you took it into the post-processing technique. But the other thing that happened is once you affected those dark areas, if you're using a slider or some other, I call them brute force tools, it also affect the highlights, and I would say negatively affect the highlights. I mean, one thing you could do is probably just crop this bottom off, and it probably wouldn't harm the composition, might even help it a little bit. I do kind of like a little bit less of that stuff at the bottom, particularly when it's blown out like this. But this is where we reach the point where we, these are global adjustments that we're doing here. I don't require you to get into local adjustments, but this is a point where you want to locally adjust. We would want to adjust probably for that part of the image in one adjustment, and then maybe the foreground in another adjustment. And that's what I end up spending a lot of time doing it in Photoshop. I just start with my global adjustment, and then I move on to the local adjustments. Sometimes I find I need to get rid of the global and just deal with local, whatever. But I like the image, but I think it's one that could use a little further exploration. I like more of this. I like this stuff here, and I like the foreground here. We bring those together into one in grayscale or color. I'm not sure, like, the other one, I like the stuff back here. In color, I'm not sure if it would work in a color scheme sort of way as effectively. So it certainly works in grayscale. But I do like the image of what I'm seeing here. So here's another image from this sort of, worm's eye view. Not that we should have worms in our carpet, but I'm getting really low. I don't know if you're just setting your camera on the carpet or maybe in a book or something like that. But I do like the blur here. I think there's a little too much going on. It's pretty. It might have been nice if we could have isolated the legs, like on a blank wall or in front of a closet or something like that. Because there's a lot going on up here, and then not much going on down here. So I don't think the composition works, but I do think what is working is how you're exploring with the shutter speeds. That is interesting stuff. Oh, this is a kind of an interesting painting with light image. Let's see, I'm not sure which one's the adjusted version. Certainly more drama in this one, but we have more elements in this one. I think that I like the one with more elements. I like that I'm seeing, I like what painting with light, I like an interaction between the painted light and something objective. So I kind of like seeing this counter. I don't know if these are little fake clouds or what they are, but and then we have this line going through it. And the line's kind of interesting, and I really like how the reflection off the table, that's almost more interesting than this line. So, I think if we push this further, thought more about this, we could figure out something to draw or some way to make these lines more expressively interact within the image. But I think there's something good going on and interesting happening within the image. And certainly, I would say your post-production helped enhance the image. All right, here we are with panning. Let's check out your, well, we don't have any XIF data. I was curious to see the shutter speed. I'm always curious to see the shutter speed on panning. It might even be 60th or something fairly quick, because if your subject's moving fast, you have a faster shutter speed trying to follow it, and you'll still get this panning effect. And we get this panning effect, and I think it's actually fairly effective and pretty interesting. I think I also like this image in black and white. Good, we have it in color. And I think it is more interesting in black and white simply because the objects up here on the top, they become less, in a sense they become more mysterious. Here they're obviously construction cones. Here, it took me a while. I'm like, oh, they're probably construction cones, but it took me a little bit, and they just become shapes, little dotted shapes. And then I like how they interact with this more organic shape, and then we have the figure here. It's centered, but I think the composition works. Because of the stuff, the action going up here, and also maybe to some degree the inaction down here. There's a nice balance between those. I'd be curious to see if it were better if the motorcycle were on the left side or maybe on the right side. But overall, I think it's a pretty successful composition. So, all right, and let's look at this. We have a couple images here. All right, and I'm trying to look. Again, there's something interesting going on with the blur. And I think it might even just be cropping it down some, because again, it suffers from the same thing that the image earlier when we looked at it. Just so much going on in that top part. I'm cropping off to the bed. I'm getting rid of the thing on the left. I mean, I might be really cropping it down just to the interaction between the animal and the blurry human legs. And yeah, I did a lot of cropping there. I cropped it down to just like that. And I like it better because there are interesting things going on. but there's just a lot going on up here. So maybe grayscale helps simplify it a little bit better. I mean, you've improved the overall contrast and density of the image in grayscale. A bit more cohesive. I don't know, maybe I'm trying to, again, I'm cropping, maybe I can get away with a little less cropping. I don't know, lamp on the right, maybe get rid of that. Yeah, I just think I like that better. I think I like this, the grayscale cropped right about there. It just keeps the image more focused on the interesting things you're creating. So, all right. Anyway, overall, I'd say good job exploring, John. And we will move along and do one more critique in this. All right, Christy, we are looking at your work here, and I am seeing Southern California. San Bernardino County, maybe. I feel like I've been to some of these places. Fascinating place, in my mind, in my experience. So, let's see. Well, that's your final portfolio. Looking ahead. Let's, oops. Get back to shutter speed. Here we go. I do like some of those compositions there, by the way, Christy. All right, so looking at these images, one of the first I saw was this and this one. And we have a color and we have a grayscale version. And looking at these, you know, I like how we've zoomed in on it a little bit, and I'm just seeing the figure and the movement of the sheet, a little bit of the bed, a little bit of the carpet, and I don't get a lot more. And I really like this composition. I think it might also work in grayscale as effectively as the color version. I think this works too. I don't know that one is stronger than the other. Certainly the color, you know, a lot of people like, you know, we just seem to react, I think, more strongly and intensely to color imagery than grayscale imagery. So, you know, maybe more people react more positively to the color version. I don't know. That's just what I hear a lot. Often, you know, students often say that grayscale images has a darker mood or something like that. I don't always agree with that, but anyways, so I like those photographs, and it's good use of blur and sharpen blur. Let's take a look here. Cherries. All right. Bing cherries, maybe. So we have a faster shutter speed. I'm going to guess also a flash. Yeah, flash on, 1/60th of a second. F5, stop action motion. You know, it's composed fairly well. You know, I like the textures of the water in particular, but it doesn't necessarily, you know, hold my interest more. So. All right, so move on. You know, we can have all these stuff working, and in the end, it's just an all right photograph. I think that happens a lot more than having all the right stuff and a great photograph happen. All right, so here we're trying to pan, I'm going to guess. And you're doing a fairly good job. We have the truck here and the landscape getting kind of blurry, moving down the road. Trucks, you know, could be a little bit sharper. Panning really takes a lot of practice to get done and done well, but overall you're getting a sense of this. And I do like the composition here, the truck, and I think I like it. I guess, I don't know if I'm just a landscape guy or what, but yeah, I like the interaction landscape. And looks like the image I could see in the new landscape photography group I kind of look at on Facebook. So I do wish this truck were just a titch sharper, but overall I like the composition. I like the power lines, I like the mountains, I like the road. You know, the truck works, so got a lot working here. All right, having fun with painting with light. I like the interaction, how you're using yourself as a subject, but then also doing quite a bit of painting with light here. You know, there's a lot of little bits of detail here as I look at this. We have this, and we have all this here, and we have multicolored lights. I don't know if you had to do the green and blue separate, or red, and might even be some red in there, or if you had a light that had maybe all three of those colors on there, and you could do it one time. But irregardless of that, there's a lot of activity going on, a lot of drawing going on within this image. And you know, I think I don't know if you used a flash Probably not, because you're kind of a little bit soft, and I'd like you a little bit sharper. So it might have been a good place to actually use a flash, a small aperture and a flash at the beginning of the exposure, and then draw on it. And but I think overall it's working out pretty well. 30 seconds. That's a fair amount of time to do something interesting, and I would say you used your time well. I was trying to see if I thought there was another version of that. Yeah, here we go. I'm not sure. This says Alt, so I'm going to guess this is the one that you played with in post-processing. I actually kind of like the other one better. Has a little more saturation in the image, and I think it just overall works better. So between this and this, oh here, and then you really begin pushing it, affecting the colors in different and almost sort of awkward ways. And yeah, so and I don't know if you're playing with curves or if you're using Photoshop or what you had going on, but we can play with it in such a way that we create very unreal color and value relationships. So and I think this is fairly expressive and interesting. I'm always, I'm never sure myself what to do with these, with that process, and I've yet to find a place to use it myself. Though I have seen it used very well by other people. So that image could work out well. I wonder if I like going back to the grayscale. I don't know. I don't know if I like this image better. The one thing that, in looking at this, is a bit more cohesive. Changing gears here, sorry. Almost the intensity of the orange on this truck is almost maybe too much for me. My computer is slowing down. If I could soften that, it might be something I might do post-processing. Just soften a little bit, just so harmonizes more within the image. Of course, maybe you don't want that harmony. Maybe you want it to be that sort of bold thing. So. All right, anyways, good job exploring, Christy. And I will move on here and finish this video.